This man, Frederick Douglass, was sold for the price of $700, his value in the slave market. Yet by that time he was a famous author and orator, bravely speaking out and writing against the horrors of slavery and for the rights of the black man. From childhood, he had rebelled against slavery. No one could persuade him it was the white man's right to buy and sell black people. On a Maryland plantation, Frederick had watched in helpless terror at the merciless attacks upon slaves. He had seen and suffered the cruelties of slavery. Often he had seen the grief of women when they were separated from husbands and children forever. When Frederick was 8 years old, he was sent to work for a family in Baltimore. His mistress, Mrs. Auld, taught him to read and was so pleased with his progress that she asked him to read for her husband. To her surprise, Mr. Auld was furious. "Learning will spoil the best nigger in the world," he said. "If he learns to read the Bible, it will forever unfit him to be a slave." This was a lesson Frederick would not forget. If learning would make him unfit to be a slave, then learning was what he intended to have. At 16, Frederick was sent back to the plantation and its backbreaking toil, spoiled for slavery by a little kindness and a little learning. His rebellious attitude was soon noticed by his master, and he was turned over to a specialist for obedience training. Now the dawn to dark labor was accompanied by floggings. One day he refused to take a beating and turned into a furious fighting rebel. "I was a changed being after that fight," Douglass said later. "When a slave cannot be flogged, he is more than half free." In 1838, disguised as a sailor, Douglass became a runaway. He took a train to New York City. There he was befriended by the Vigilance Committee, a group that assisted fugitive slaves. Before long, he was settled in New Bedford, Massachusetts, working for low pay on the ships, but reveling in his newfound freedom and happy in his new marriage and home life. Douglass now began to take part in the activities of the local anti-slavery society. When he met William Lloyd Garrison, the famous editor and crusader for freedom, his future was settled. It was at Garrison's suggestion that Douglass went on a speaking tour. He held audiences spellbound with the story of his life, acting out the roles in the savage drama of slavery, the brutal white master, the weary, sad-faced slave dreaming of a far-off promised land, the vicious whip-cracking overseer. He could make an audience see and feel the plight of the slave. But he was not content to be a platform performer. "It did not entirely satisfy me to narrate wrongs," he said. "I felt like denouncing them." A rumor was spreading that Douglass was a fraud, that he was a free, educated black who had never been south of the Mason-Dixon line. To stop the rumor and to add force to his crusade, Douglass wrote the story of his life, giving names and dates and legal proof that he was a fugitive slave. On the advice of friends, he went to England and remained there for nearly 2 years. While he spoke for the abolitionist cause, English friends raised money to buy his freedom. In England, he was treated with a warmth and respect which he could not hope to find upon his return to America. Now that he was legally free, there was much to be done to awaken people to the injustice and dangers of slavery. Back in America in the 1850s, Douglass became a leader of great influence, combining the power of the printed word with the force of direct action. As an agent of the Underground Railroad in Rochester, New York, he gave shelter and aid to hundreds of runaway slaves. Douglass became a valuable friend and advisor to the abolitionist John Brown. He was consulted about various plans for arming and liberating slaves in the South. While he greatly respected Brown and hated injustice, Douglass felt he could not support the planned attack on the arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. He warned Brown that his plan would not free a single slave and that he was going into a trap in which he would die. The attack failed, and John Brown died on the gallows, December 2nd, 1859. With the outbreak of the Civil War, Douglass urged President Lincoln to emancipate and arm the slaves, to make it a war to end slavery. But it was not until the summer of 1862 that Lincoln decided that slavery must be abolished. On the day that the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, Douglass led a crowd of 3,000 in a jubilant celebration in Boston. Fully dedicated to the War of Liberation, he became an eloquent recruiter for the Union Army. In the midst of his campaign for Army enlistments, Douglass heard reports of ill treatment of black soldiers, that they were receiving half pay and were not allowed to wear official uniforms, and that they were denied promotion. Feeling that his trust had been betrayed, Douglass went to the White House to talk to President Lincoln. A warm friendship followed, and in time, Lincoln saw that conditions were improved. During the post-war Reconstruction period, Douglass was nationally recognized as the top spokesman for his people, champion of the poor and homeless freedmen in the South, father of the Black protest movement, advisor to presidents. At times, he held important office in Washington and was once United States Minister to Haiti. The black man's struggle for equality was Douglass's great passion, and it was also part of a larger dream, a vision of peace, of worldwide brotherhood and equality for all. To the white people, I say, measure not the black man by the heights you have attained, but rather the depths from which he has come, those depths into which you plunged and held him for 2 centuries.